Okay, we're going to talk about framing and specifically framing your needle art or anything else with fancy mats. So, this is a thing that a lot of framers do. If you're not local to where I am, I'm sure a framer near you does that. And it's made much easier by the invention of computerized mat cutters. So, I have a computerized mat cutter. My brand is Wizard. The one I have is quite a bit older. It works great. The newer ones have fancy things. Someday I'll get one, but for now, I'm very happy with the one that I have. It runs off a computer. There's a program, Mat Cutter program in there. Mine is on, for those who are nostalgic, Windows XP. And then there's also a thing in there called Path Trace. So the way that that works for specifically this one that I did is first I stretch the piece, always the first step, unless of course we're washing it. Sometimes we wash things, sometimes people bring them in washed, sometimes they don't need washing. So I'm meticulous about my stretching. I like to get it as perfect as possible, but the fact is needle art is done on fabric with stitches going through the fabric, and there'll be different tension in different places. There'll be some places where there's more stitching and some places where there's less stitching, so it will stretch differently. I always start out stretching it right along a specific line. So in the fabric, I stretch all sides evenly along a specific line. So it's done perfectly. However, that doesn't necessarily mean it'll look perfect. Because if you have a piece that is denser in the middle, there's more stitches in the middle and fewer stitches at the top and bottom, it's going to stretch differently. So the top and bottom are going to stretch more with less effort than the middle, which is going to have less give to it because it's packed tight with stitches. So sometimes, even though I follow a specific line when I initially stretch it, sometimes that has to be fiddled around with until it's correct, because otherwise it doesn't look right. It may technically be right, but it doesn't look right. So I spend a decent amount of time stretching and restretching things until I'm happy with the way that they look. That's particularly hard with things that have stitched borders because, again, fabric, tension, stitches, getting a stitched border absolutely straight is really hard. It's almost impossible. So then the next thing that I do is I take a photograph of the item. I import the photograph into Path Trace. I don't have a picture of it in there, but that is the next step. I forgot to take a picture of it. I probably have a picture on the computer somewhere, but whatever. And then you trace the lines of whatever the mat you want to do. So in this specific case, I wanted the mat to go along with the lines exactly of this maple leaf. You trace it in Path Trace. That takes a little while. And then there's an offset in Path Trace that you can offset the shape by a certain amount, like half an inch or whatever. So I'll use that offset to take the traced line that I made and make it bigger, so there's a little bit of breathing room around the stitched item before the mat. So it's not just stitching and then immediately mat. You want a little bit of white space in there. And so Path Trace, then offset, and then you have to bring that into the mat cutter software. And that is where the magic happens. That is where you tell the machine to cut it in whatever specific things you want. In this case, it was a double mat, so we had to tell the machine to do that, and that sort of thing. Now, in a perfect world, if everything was great and I had had enough sleep, that would have meant that I could cut a template on just a piece of paper, a piece of brown paper, so that I can make sure that it fits properly and everything is great. It doesn't always work out that way, even though I was following an image. Sometimes, for whatever reason, it doesn't come out right. So I printed a few templates. If it's not exactly right, then you go back into Path Trace, move the lines around, bring them back into the mat cutter software, make sure that it's all the right sizes and stuff in there. Cut another sample or 3 or 4. Make sure that's okay. But the thing is, with that brown paper, sometimes for this one, the maple leaf had a lot of jagged points and they would sort of curl up. It was hard to tell because it wasn't sitting flat all the time whether or not it was perfect. So I printed out a few samples on mat board. Now, mat board is not cheap. So that's the other thing. If you mess up like I did that day, I just couldn't quite get one of the corners right the way I wanted it. And so then made a few adjustments, wasn't 100% happy with the adjustments, made more adjustments. And then when I thought I had it right, I would cut it on mat board, not the mat board specifically for that job, just an extra piece that I had kicking around. However, that extra piece, I mean, mat board is really expensive, and that extra piece could have been used for somebody else's framing job. So it does use a lot of resources. And in this case, I guess I was just tired. Usually it doesn't take this many tries to get it right. But whatever, things happen. And the only thing I cared about was the final product being right. So whatever, I used some extra mat board. And then, yeah, after however many tries, and just making sure that it lines up exactly how you want and that it's exactly the right shape, then voila, you get a beautiful finished product. And I really love the way it turned out. Also, this is one of my favorite frames. It's a gorgeous wood molding by Roma Moldings from Italy. They have gorgeous stuff, but this one, I have it in a few different colors, the sample of the molding, and it is one of my very favorites. I use it a lot just because it looks great on so many things. It looks great on natural things, and I remember framing a polar bear print with it, and it just was gorgeous because I think that one has like the little white flecks in it, the lighter flecks, and it just, yeah, beautiful frame, Roma Moldings. I highly recommend that one. But that's it for now. I just want to share the process with you of cutting cool shape mats. We do all sorts of different shapes. Using Path Trace, we can do all sorts of cool things. And also the software comes with a bunch of pre-designed templates for us to use that have really neat designs in them too. So if you're coming in for framing and you want a sort of fancy shape mat, please let me know because we can do that. Of course, there's going to be extra expense because as you can see, there's a lot more work involved. Even for a small thing, I had somebody bring something in and it was, I don't remember exactly what it was floral, and it was a needlepoint, and it had one little tiny like rectangle sticking outside of what would just otherwise have been a circle. And it was a leaf. It was just the point of a leaf sticking out. But that meant instead of drawing a circle around it, I had to do the whole process of putting in Path Trace and tracing it and then cutting a sample, making sure that was okay, that sort of thing. It's still just to make that tiny little triangle on an otherwise totally normal circle took a lot of extra time and a bunch of extra resources because I had to use a bunch of paper and then at least one sample mat. Not every framer will use extra mats to make sure it's okay because usually the paper's fine, but I usually like to just see it properly. So if I have a piece of mat board that I can use for that, I will because I just want to make sure it's okay. But even just that little triangle was a whole bunch of extra work. So to have a special mat cut, there will be an extra expense to that, but they sure do look nice. Have a great day.